voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah, it's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
John, do you know who Admiral McRaven is? You ever heard of this guy?
No, I haven't.
Admiral McRaven, I think he's retired now. Admiral McRaven, I think probably 10, 12 years ago, gave a very famous speech in front of, I believe, Texas, University of Texas, Austin. Is that Hook'em Horns? Is that who the Hook'em Horns people are?
That is, yeah, UTA.
Okay. He gave the very impressive and very memorable. You can go on YouTube and find it. There's a gazillion different versions of it there. But he gave this commencement speech years ago, and he talked about, and he was, I guess you always are like a Marine. You're always a Navy SEAL. He was a Navy SEAL, and he went through BUDS training. And he talked about that one of the things they taught them in SEAL training was you should accomplish one thing every day, and they taught them that they should make their bed perfectly every day. When they get up in the morning, get out of bed, you make your bed perfectly, and the idea being then you can say, I've accomplished one thing today, okay?
Wow, okay.
I will say we've accomplished one thing today. We've made CP.
Who did we make happy, Brad?
We made CP happy. You know who I'm talking about,
Charlie
right?
Parker, the former noted jazz musician, is a big fan of our show, Brad. He listens regularly and gives us feedback often in real time.
Right. That's true what that person does, but that's not the person's name.
And you know, Brad, why you don't actually make your bed first thing in the morning.
I haven't made my bed in about 20 years. Why? Why is that, John?
Okay. In real life, you don't make your bed immediately upon rising because your dead skin cells and other sweat bacteria needs to be killed by the air. So if you seal that environment back up by immediately putting your sheets, your comforter, your pillows back where they quote unquote belong, you just give sweat, dead skin cells, all that bacteria an opportunity to promulgate throughout the day. So actually you should leave your bed undone, at least for an hour, bare minimum, first thing in the morning. Now, this is based on articles I've read in the last 10 years. And maybe if we have a microbiologist, they could dispute that. But in general, you don't want to make your bed right away upon rising.
You know, for a minute there, I thought I had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the show instead of John Combest.
Thank you. Yeah, and fluoride causes autism, Brad. So let's just get right into that.
Is that really true about you're supposed to leave your bed unmade because of the skin cells?
Yeah. So think about like on a typical, it's going to be 70 today, but let's say in a month it's 80 in the morning, and you sweat all night in bed. Yeah, you don't want to cover that back up. You don't want to seal up that bed. You want to let your sheets breathe, Brad, and let your sweat evaporate, or else you're just creating a petri dish of your disgusting dead epidermis cells combining together with sweat, and it's funky, you know?
And for you listeners out there who think that there's no redeeming qualities of this show, I have to tell you, John just did that in like a minute and a half. That would be a 30-minute segment on NPR. That would be.
It would be, and it would be speaking much more quietly.
Right.
But it would be very diplomatic. And we would actually, Brad, be talking about the intersectionality between the struggle of sweat glands and dead epidermis cells. They've been discriminated against for years. Why should we cover them up, Brad? Let them breathe. Let them be open and free.
No, they would start like This 6521 is a dead epidermis cell, but you may think that he's just dead, but he's had a tortured life. That's the way the show would go. Okay.
It would be. And then they would have, I hate to get us off topic more than we are, Brad, but in working with the good folks at NPR over the years, particularly Planet Money, you have a phrase for it, and I forgot what it was. What is the sound of ambient noise in the background?
White noise.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. I didn't know if it had a more specific name. But I did a piece for them, and we were out in beautiful cotton fields in Lubbock, Texas, and they kept wanting to pause and get the sound of the wind because they said in the intro to the show, you know, they would want to have a little bit of wind at the beginning and a little bit of the sound of a cotton plant rustling in the wind.
Is there a sound that cotton plant makes?
Yeah, hold on. You can hear it. I'll recreate it here. Ready?
Okay.
That was it.
Oh, that was good. And you know who that is for those listening for the first time? That is John Combest. And why do we, especially on this Friday, honor Mr. Combest?
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
Because John works his butt off 7 days a week, 365 a year for 21 plus years. Was it 21 or 23? It's 23, isn't it, right?
It's 23.
23 years. Every single day he puts together the John Combest top list. And he doesn't have a specific goal and number. Sometimes it's 20. Sometimes it may be 60 or 70. But what we do is we start the show off every morning with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
Because John Combest counts down the top 3 stories that are on his site that morning. Did I do a good job with that, John?
Oh, it's fantastic, Brad.
And we start with...
In third place...
To quote the immortal 20th century philosophers, NWA, the mother bleepin' saga continues. But this time it seems to take a happy turn. And Brad, it has a turn that involves cooperation and common sense coming from St. Louis City. I know, I didn't believe it either. But let's dig into it. A story brought to us by Jacob Barker from the Post-Dispatch, assisted by Austin Hugelet of the Post-Dispatch. Brad, we've talked at length about how Austin has uncovered many of these quote-unquote businesses in St. Louis City getting huge grants from the St. Louis Development Corporation. These shadow businesses, some of them not even headquartered or operative in St. Louis City. Many of them not even real businesses. Kara Spencer, boy, there's no grass growing underneath her feet, Brad. She has tapped a brand new chair of the St. Louis Development Corporation. And just to make sure she can keep close tabs on it, she has appointed her own chief of staff, a woman named Nancy Hawes, to replace Neil Richardson. Neil Richardson was the former chair. Now, it's not clear exactly when the transition is going to take place. There was a regularly scheduled board meeting that was supposed to happen yesterday, but it got pushed off 2 weeks, namely because Kara Spencer's coming in, and we know there's going to be changes. No need for the board to meet if a lot of them aren't going to be around next time. But here's the gist of it, Brad. The surprising thing to me is that Neil Richardson says, hey, the mayor has a right to go whatever direction she wants. I won't be surprised if I'm replaced. And in fact, I won't be surprised that I am being replaced. And it's the mayor's prerogative to make the changes that she wants. Now, I'm paraphrasing Richardson there. But Brad, this is surprising to me because you see in the city so much strife on the St. Louis Development Commission board. And uniquely, the mayor only appoints one person to the St. Louis Development Corporation board because the idea is that it's supposed to be separate from city leaders. You know, you want to have a little separation there. But Brad, the cynic in me thinks that maybe Richardson knows that more bad stuff is going to be coming out about grants. Maybe he thinks even more corruption will be exposed. And Richardson says, you know what? I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to leave with my head up. I'm going to do the right thing. And maybe when more bad stuff gets exposed, people will remember me slightly more fondly because I left with my head up in a genteel and kind way. What do you think, Brad?
John, I can't believe you're making fun of this. I mean, those people applied for grants to buy empty lots, and they got those grants to buy those empty lots because that's where their businesses are, in those empty lots. What's the problem, John?
You're exactly
I don't
right.
quite get
and how
it.
about the gentleman whose name escapes me, who said that he always wanted to do building demolition, and he had never done it before, and he didn't have any equipment, but give me some money and I'll totally start a business doing demolition.
And that would be like somebody saying, I've always wanted to do gynecology and give me a grant to do gynecology and I'll learn OJT, right? You know what I'm saying?
Did you say gynecology?
Yes.
Oh, Brad, we're getting spicy. I don't know when this show started touching tawdry subjects, but I like it.
Listen to you, John. Okay, we ready for number 2?
We sure are.
Up a notch to number 2.
Speaking of chicks that I'd like to spread, Brad, where were you on the TV show Charlie's Angels?
I love Charlie's Angels because the best part of Charlie's Angels was when Charlie talked to him on the phone. And that was it John Forsythe? He had a beautiful voice. What a great voice. Remember that?
Yeah. And he had a name on the show, and the name escapes me right now. I looked it up on the old wikis. But for young folks, they might not remember. It was a show that went from, I looked it up, Brad, 1976 to 1981, and it starred the great Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Gone much too early.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And she seemed like she was on the right part of that hot, crazy matrix, too. You know, didn't you get the sense that she was a little bit loony?
Well, a little bit, but that's the way she came off on the show. But yet, I think it was the way it was written. She sort of gave up that vibe, but then they showed the side of her that was very smart. You know what I'm saying? She did things on the show that made her people go, wow, she's really smart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I didn't. I was a little young for the show, and if I were to watch it today, I'd probably put it on mute, frankly. I'd give it the Telemundo treatment. But I'm getting us off track here, Brad. You mentioned specifically the gist of the show was that you had these private detectives, these hot chicks, or at least Farrah Fawcett was hot. And then you had this voice on the phone of a guy named Charlie, and you never got to see Charlie. And I was thinking about Charlie's Angels, Brad, because that's the center of a controversy at the Missouri Capitol. It also features one of your favorite life topics, Brad, something that happens to you a lot, boomers arguing over a Facebook post. So the gist of it is, we've talked on this show before about how Missouri Republicans want to go back and, quote unquote, fix what the voters passed with Proposition A, which was minimum wage increases and mandatory sick time for employees, forcing businesses of a certain size to give mandatory, quote unquote, sick time off to employees. So senators that were Democrats and Republicans were trying to hammer out some kind of a compromise. Is there something that would keep Democrats from filibustering all day, all night at the end of session to keep Republicans from doing this? And things seem to be going pretty well. But then Cindy O'Loughlin, Brad, she's one of your people. She's a boomer. She posted on Facebook that she was, quote, heading to the mothership. She posted a picture of the Missouri Capitol. Prop A on the agenda. No to this business killer. We are prepared to stay as long as it takes. That's a pretty bold Facebook proclamation from Senator O'Loughlin. Well, Doug Beck didn't like it. Brad, he's one of your people, too. He's a boomer. He saw that Facebook post at 7:23 a.m. And here's what Doug Beck says. We did our best to negotiate in good faith, but people on both sides of the negotiations were blindsided by the pro tem. They got blindsided by a Facebook post that said that she was going to fight, Brad, so they didn't like it. You say, John, where does Charlie's Angels come in? Well, I'll tell you why. Cindy O'Loughlin had something to say about that. I guess during negotiations, Brad, off the floor of the Senate, Democrats led by Doug Beck kept talking to someone on the phone. Cindy O'Loughlin and other Republicans were miffed. They were offended by the fact that Doug Beck had some nameless voice on the phone. Maybe we'll call him Charlie, Brad. Doug Beck had Charlie on the phone giving marching orders to Democrats, telling them what to accept in the negotiations and what's not acceptable. Here's what Cindy said. It's quite difficult to get agreement when you aren't dealing with your colleagues, but a nameless, faceless person on the phone. Well, Doug Beck says, hey, I'm not going to tell you who was on the phone with these negotiations, but it was someone who represents workers. I think that's really all we need, Brad. Now, Doug Beck is a president of the union for pipefitters and plumbers. Maybe he was on the phone with a union boss. Maybe it was a union boss in Missouri. Maybe it was, if Doug is the capo of the local, maybe it was a union boss in New Jersey. Maybe it was somebody, maybe it was the ghost of somebody at the old Pipefitters facility there off Larimore and Columbia Bottoms, Brad. We don't know. But Cindy's mad that she doesn't get to know who this nameless, faceless person is. And Doug Beck's mad because Cindy's just going on Facebook making wacky posts. Who do you side with here, Brad?
John, I know who it was.
Who was it?
You're not going to believe it. It was Virvus Jones. That was the voice on the phone.
Virvus Jones and me setting plans for the city. Our daughter lost the election and we deleted our Twitter. That's a new Counting Crow song, Brad. I don't know. I got to say that I don't side with necessarily Cindy here. My heart is with Cindy, obviously. But, for Cindy to go be doing Facebook posts, I don't actually know what Doug is offended by. I don't know what's offensive about Cindy saying that she's going to fight. Like, people talk about fighting on Facebook all the time. I don't know what Doug's so offended by. And he's a straight white male. You're not allowed to be offended if you're a straight white male. Like, if you're one of these purple hairs, you can get offended by Facebook posts. But Doug, don't be offended by Facebook. I expect, as a guy that grew up in Spanish Lake, I expect a little bit more testicular fortitude from a pipe fitter.
John. Okay, I can say a couple things, but I won't. On to number one.
The number one.
We're going to go across the state to Jackson County. Brad, you gave a helpful overview to listeners yesterday from the St. Louis area who might not be aware that the Kansas City region includes a couple counties. When we talk about St. Louis City, we're just talking about the city. It's not in its own county. But Kansas City has Jackson County, and that area includes Clay County and others. You say, cool dissertation, John. Who cares? Well, the Jackson County Republicans had a Lincoln-Reagan Day dinner on Saturday. But they didn't have any, generic Lincoln days where you eat some rubber chicken and listen to old people babble, and hopefully you can get a non-threatening black guy to come in and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we could say, we're diverse. Anyway, Jackson County had surprise guests, Brad. They brought in some of the individuals who were involved in the January 6th terror attack. You remember that violent terror attack at the Capitol? They had a couple people that had faced charges there. And that's controversial, according to the Kansas City Star. This story, by the way, is brought to us by a couple content creators, Kason Bayless, who generally does a really good job at the Star. And then they got, I think she's an old lady named Judy Thomas. She's done a lot of victimhood stories over the years. But this story is about how some of these folks that were involved in the January 6th protests were at Jackson County Lincoln Days. Now, you would say, John, this probably isn't a very big story. But the Star reached out to John Patterson. He's the Speaker of the House. He's that guy that defeated Justin Sparks in the Speaker election. Here's what John Patterson has to say about the Jackson County Republicans. Quote, they're a bunch of people who get together in their echo chamber and stew in their grievances. I'm not surprised to hear these people were their guests. So a little Republican on Republican criticism going on here, Brad. What do you think of this?
I don't get this whole thing. First off, let's be honest. The January 6th thing was terrible, but there were all these people that got swept up in it. And if you've seen the videos of some people literally walking into the Capitol with the Capitol Police opening the doors for them. Yes, there were horrible people that did horrible things to the police officers and other spots of the thing. But yet, it's not this broad brush thing. It's not like everybody there was like this terrible criminal. It's like you and I talk about all the time. It's like, if you, any kind of an organization, you've got, it's like the KDHX thing. You got a group
is that a radio station, Brad?
There's more stuff on that. And by the way, you don't even want to talk about it anymore. The plot thickens even more. This has gotten to be...
Why don't we talk about it and see? I do want to talk about it more.
Okay, we'll talk about that in Block C. the thing that I bring up all the time, and I mean no disrespect to it, but Marc Cox was there, who's on the air right now at another radio station on 97.1. Marc Cox was there. And he doesn't talk about it too much anymore because I don't think he wants to be associated with the fact that there was the January 6th group, but yet he was there as a reporter. The interesting thing, and I give him credit for this, when he does talk about it, he says he was the only St. Louis media person there. There was nobody else from St. Louis, none of the other stations or the Post, the Dispatch, or any of that kind of. He was the only guy. And the reason he went there was he wanted to cover it as a reporter, which he is an excellent reporter. At least he was back in the day on Channel 4, an excellent reporter. A guy who used his journalism degree to the max, and I appreciate that. Matter of fact, if Dr. Winter was still around, he would appreciate Marc Cox. How's that? Okay, we're overtime. We have to get moving here. I got a bunch of stuff to talk about this morning, John. And, of course, I always love to get into things where I say one thing and John makes fun of me and tells me why I'm stupid and I really don't know what to talk about. I love
Me too, Brad. I love that, too.
I know you do. I love those moments.